everybody what we mean in terms of who our members are. And so Climate Health Now defines the health community, if you can push forward, Schwinn, to be anybody in the entire health community, which we actually see as kind of similar to the health sector. So from upstream, public health, to downstream, to actual clinical care, anybody in California who is involved in health, whether it's community health workers or public health or therapists or phlebotomists or healthcare administrators. So anybody really broadly. Health engineers, Walt, yes, we're glad you're here. Yeah, anybody who's involved. So it's really writ large. And the reason is because we all know how existential the challenge ahead of us is, and how nobody's going to be healthy if we don't address the climate crisis. So we really know that we need as much people power as we possibly can, who we are organizing through community organizing, and that's how we're defining the health community and who our members are. So invite all your friends and colleagues. And we also really want to uplift the fact that we're much more than clinicians alone. And sometimes there can be a conflation of that CHN is about doctors and nurses, but we're really not. And we're really about the whole health community, because we know it takes teams to work well. So just know that, and invite anybody who kind of fits in here who you think also shares your concern about climate, because there are people, and we really want to have an inclusive community that represents the broader community. So that is how we're defining the health community.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Shuin, and I am on the transitional leadership team. And I just wanted to remind everyone about what our vision is. And so just like Ashley just said, we want the entire California health community to bring their voices to climate advocacy. So very, very broad, but where the impact that healthcare has on climate change, it really is in all parts of healthcare delivery, and so that's why we really want the entire California health community to be here. And then also that, our membership, we want it to be diverse, engaged, and taking responsibility for systems level climate solutions in California. And we have a very ambitious goal for this year, which is that, we have a lot of people who are considered members, CHN members, but maybe a lot of people haven't done any engagement activities recently. And so we really are hoping that, the offerings and the things that the campaigns, the activities that we develop this year allows for everyone to get involved, right? There's going to be something for everyone. And so we are hoping that every CHN member has participated in a CHN engagement activity this year. It's a pretty big undertaking, and we are going to also have to start figuring out how to track all of this, but we're going to get there.
All right, so how are we going to get there? So thinking about what we've just talked about, who we are and what we want to do together. So our vision, what quite literally gets me up in the morning with the fire in my stomach, is thinking about how we can get the whole California health community, exactly as Ashley described it, thinking about climate change as a health issue and using our voices to achieve systemic level action. So the way that we are going to get there is by working together, working in partnership. This is, our role in this is to uplift the health aspects of things, but we're only going to do it in partnership with the myriad and many community, environmental justice, and other groups that are also doing this work. And we're going to get there by being organized and figuring out where we can lean in and lend our voices. All right, so we're going to not delve into this super deeply right now. For many of you, you've seen this chart before. It's one we have been showing and sharing around probably since the summer. But we're going to highlight just a few of these teams right now and walk through it. But just really briefly, the big buckets to be looking at here and that we're about to talk about are the statewide leadership team, which you all already know us. That's me, Ashley Schwinn, Brenda Nguyen, Margie Chen, and Noma Ojiaku. And then we're going to be focusing on our advocacy advisory team and our local hub teams, really for the purposes of this talk and how they will be working together on statewide legislative advocacy. Awesome.
Yeah, and so we're elated that we have a team of experts who we chose them because of their expertise in climate policy in California with, health and equity woven in. And so we'll be meeting actually in 3 weeks for our first meeting. And the members of Climate Health Now's advocacy advisory team for the next 2 years will include Linda Rudolph, who's one of our longest running mentors, who is involved with lots of things, including Public Health Institute, Deborah Gorman, who is the president and CEO of the Green Lighting Institute, Geraldine Lopez Mendoza, who's an organizer in LA with the Climate Center, Naila Pope Hardin, who is the ED of Climate Plan, Bill McGavern, who is the policy lead with Coalition for Clean Air, and Jess Wilson, who's an organizer with Last Chance Alliance. So these awesome people are going to be recommending to us, because they have, legislative analysts, they know advocacy both on the regulatory side and the legislative side in California in a way that we don't, and we actually don't need to. We just need to ally with those who do. And our question to them is, Climate Health Now's policy platform is the U.S. call to action on climate health and equity, which maybe we could share in the chat, but the top, it's a 10-point policy action agenda. The first one is uphold the Paris climate agreements. The second one is phase out fossil fuels. And it's all about addressing climate in a way that centers equity in the interest of health. So we're asking these 6 climate policy experts in California this year, where do you see a incredibly passionate, organized group of 600, 700 members of the health community? Where could our advocacy really make a difference in helping to advance, catalyze the success in coalition with other groups? So we're going to ask them that question. They're going to recommend to us roughly 10 advocacy opportunities, including legislative and regulatory. And then the statewide leadership team is going to choose 2 or probably 3, because we're ambitious, of those. And those are our North Stars for the year. We're going to be all in to help those campaigns win. So these are our allies, and they're going to help us to choose a place where we will really be able to make a difference. And the teams within Climate Health Now who are going to carry out those campaigns is going to be an amazing year. We say this a lot, but we're definitely building the plane as we fly it. But we have some amazing new leaders in Climate Health Now who are going to be leading 2 geographically based teams or local hub teams. They're enormous, but local. So the NorCal one, the meeting is actually going to be this Sunday in my living room. It's in person, which will be really fun. So Karen Duderstadt will be a part of that. Anita Gained, Cindy Haig, who is at a birth right now, otherwise she would have been here. Jessie Desjardins, Knox Kelly, and Teresa Munoz are all going to be on the NorCal Hub leadership team. And then the Central Valley team has Alex Sharif, who I see has joined in here, among others, Hannah Valino and Kunal Sukija. So they are going to be working really closely with us on those 2 or probably 3 advocacy campaigns for the year. And they'll be working really closely with all of you to help you see the ways to get engaged and help those campaigns be successful. So we'll be learning a lot together. There's going to be lots of opportunity for new things, learning new things, how to get involved in advocacy in a really powerful way. And we don't quite have the team together for SoCal, so we're hoping that that could be something we work towards for next year.
Sorry, I'm very slow at unmuting myself. Okay, so then we also have resource teams. And so these are supportive groups. And so everybody is going to be in a local hub, depending on where you live. But resource teams are additional resources, as the name implies, to support our work. And so there is two of them. So one is the decarb and sustainability resource team, and that the leaders for this team is going to be Bill and Pam. And sorry, I can't see who is here, so I don't know if everyone is here, but if you are, just wait.
I see Bill. I'm not
okay. Awesome. Oh, there you are. Okay, Bill. And then also Pam Lee. And so yeah, so then that team will be launching soon. And then there will be CHN Speaks, which is also going to be it's in formation. But we will to be TBD is, I guess, the best way to say it. So let's see, there we go.
Awesome. All righty. So I am just going to talk through this. We've already talked actually through a bunch of this. I think Ashley went over some of this, but just to kind of walk us through it again and make sure we're sort of on the same page. I'm seeing in real time, Bill is here because I-80 is closed. He was going to go skiing. So Bill, thanks for being here. So Ashley introduced our advocacy advisory team, who are people who have expertise and experience with climate, health, and equity, legislative and regulatory advocacy and policy in California. We are meeting with them at the end of March. As Ashley talked about, they'll be helping out or proposing basically a small number of pieces of legislation or regulation at the state level where they think our health voices could be particularly impactful on moving the needle towards success. Our leadership team, which will include representation from the resource team and the two local hub teams that you were just introduced to as well, will huddle and think about what has been proposed and figure out thinking about what is our capacity, what do we think, what do we think our members are interested in working on. We will come up with 2 or 3, we'll see where we land, statewide campaigns that we all together will engage on for the rest of the year. And hopefully that'll be by April 2023 that we'll be able to announce that. Awesome. So one other thing we want to plug, and Kathy, I see your message to me, PowerBase does have the ability to collect legislative districts. So we're going to try to connect all of these dots here. So we behind the scenes have been using a database called PowerBase for about the last year. And one of the many awesome things that PowerBase allows us to do is to really understand where our members are in California down to a census tract level. So who is in which state senator's district, who is in which state assembly person's district, Congress people, etc. And so the reason that this information is so important is because we know our health voices are impactful when we use them to advocate, and we also know that our elected officials care a lot about who is in their district and who is voting or not voting for them. So we are really, really interested in being able to match up health folks, which is all of us, when we are specifically advocating to elected officials, trying to find constituents in particular. So one of the things, we're going to plug this twice, now and then again at the end of the meeting, but one of the things that we are really looking for right now is to really update and have a better understanding of where our members are in California and what you all are doing. So tomorrow morning, scheduled to go out at 7:30 a.m., you all will be getting an email that has something called the magic link in it, which is basically an invitation for you to update your member profile in Powerbase. So the email that you will get is what you see on the left here. It will also have a recording of this meeting, so it'll be slightly modified. And then when you click that link, you're basically going to go to the screen on the right that says update my information. You can, it'll take about a minute to do, and we would really, really appreciate it if you can do that. And the reason this is so important is so that we can start really organizing ourselves in a meaningful way, so that we can talk to these elected officials and achieve the change that we want.
So thank you, Amanda. Yeah, we really need that information to map our people power. And yeah, so we would appreciate you're doing that form. So it probably is obvious, but just to clarify before we hand it off to Kathy Dervin, why are we here today learning about the California legislative cycle? And if you can push forward, Schwinn. So like any awesome team, you have to know the rules of the game really well. And most of us, I don't know, in health, I think our training actually often teaches us to be apolitical, but health turns out to be really political. So we need to help, supplement our political education, which is what we're doing today. So the game that we want to enable the entire health community to be a part of is engaging in, state level climate policy advocacy. And I put part of, because legislative is a part of it, but then regulatory, which for some folks it might be helpful. Regulatory is things like the California Air Resource Board or CalGEM, which is the agency that hands out permits to dig new fossil fuel, new oil wells. So the regulatory side, we also were gonna, consider engaging in an advocacy campaign there, but today we're focusing on the legislative side, and that's what Kathy is really an expert at. So we'll pass it off to Kathy.
Awesome. Okay, so we are on time. This is awesome. It is really an honor for me to introduce Kathy Dervin to you all. I think probably many people on this call know Kathy and have interacted with her. Ashley and I were just reminiscing about very, very early on, I think possibly before Climate Health Now even had its name, when we were talking to Linda Rudolph, she was like, you need, if you want to learn about the legislative cycle, you have to talk to Kathy Dervin. And we were talking about how we met her in a coffee house in Oakland pre-COVID and huddled with her around this small table, and she mapped it out. And we were like, this was, in 30 minutes, she was able to teach us a ton. So it is really an honor to get to introduce her right now to you all. So her bio is very long. I'm just going to read some of the highlights. Kathy is a retired public health official who has worked on climate change and public health for the last 14 years. She co-founded 350 Bay Area, which is one of the largest grassroots climate activist groups in California. She's worked on fracking, refinery, safety and air quality, transportation issues, clean energy, city and county climate action planning, and climate policy at the state legislature and Congress. She is a longtime member of the California Sierra Club's Climate and Energy Committee, where she helped to start a climate literacy work group in the state and also the SF Bay chapter. She has trained many volunteers to work on climate legislation and is involved in many climate, health, and environmental justice coalitions, including Physicians for Social Responsibility and Climate Health Now. And I will turn it over to you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Ashley, for setting this up and for inviting me. It's great to be here today with those of you who are new to Climate Health Now and those of you who have been helping to build this organization of health professionals for a while now. I've pretty much prepared a basic overview of the state legislative process for the time that we have today. So I see in the participants today, there's some folks that are really, really expert in the twists and turns and nuances of legislative processes. So I'm going to talk about how you can access some of those folks as you do this work. So those of you that know a lot, this will be pretty basic for you. The thing about state legislation is there's always something you can speak up on, even if you're new or you feel like you're still learning things. And there's always more to learn, no matter how experienced you are in kind of the nuances and twists and turns of the legislative process. And our legislators are always changing, so some of them are new as well. So why focus on this? I mean, California is considered a leading subnational entity in the world on adopting and implementing climate policy. But even here, there are many challenges, and we have much, much more to do to both achieve our goals that have been set by the state and actually proceed to even more ambitious goals, given the climate crisis proceeding as fast as it is. So one key thing I want to make sure you take away from, and one reason I'm here today, is that I feel like the health voice still is not as well represented in Sacramento and in our legislators' offices as it can be. And that's not to some health groups are doing excellent work. But we are a big sector of both the economy and the scientific professional world, and know a lot about our patients and the health of our communities. And that voice and that perspective and the narrative around health equity and our patients and our communities really can be more pronounced and more ever present in the discussions that go on in Sacramento. So that's one thing I want to leave you with, is no matter how new or experienced you are, we have an important role to play, whether you're a nurse, a physician, public or environmental health specialist in a clinic or hospital or academic or community setting. So please take that as a kind of asset entering into this work. Okay, next slide. So here's some of the basics. So we have a very formal and professional legislative body in California. There's 40 state senators and 80 assembly members. So I hope you're learning who your representatives are. We just went through a redistricting process in California. So some of you may have even been changed districts. And then every 2 years, all the assembly members are up for re-election. So there's a bunch of new people this year coming into positions. Those are really good people to get a hold of early on in the process and introduce yourself, because they're learning too, and they haven't yet kind of been pigeonholed by some of the lobby groups. Then, in addition to the members, there's important leadership positions. So I've just pulled out two pictures here. Senator Tony Atkins from San Diego is the Speaker Pro Tem of the Senate. And then Anthony Rendon from Los Angeles is Speaker of the Assembly. And then there's other leaders that play special roles and have different roles that they play in the legislature. There's committee chairs, there's budget committee chairs. So you kind of want to get to know what your own legislator is, where do they fit in this kind of big process, both in Sacramento, but also back in their district where you are a constituent. The Democrats in California have a supermajority in both houses, which means they technically have enough votes to pass 2/3 or tax bills, which is a high bar, without getting any Republican votes. But not all Democrats are progressives or liberals. And this comes up a lot in fossil fuel issues around fossil fuels. And some of the solutions that we need on the climate side is, we really have to work with Democrats who may be in more purple or red districts, especially in the Central Valley or the Inland Empire or some rural areas, because they may not feel like they have a lot of support to take a strong Democratic vote. And the legislature over many years is getting more diverse, especially with Latino leaders and the roles that they're playing. We have a 2-year session. So in January, we started the first year of a 2-year session, and I'll get into why that matters around bills later. So we essentially have a full-time legislature from January to September, January to August. Now that compares to some other states. Hawaii has a 60-day legislative session. Washington has a complicated odd years, they have 105 days. On even years, they have 60 days. And Wyoming, little Wyoming, has 40-day legislative session every other year. And just to point out, that may be a good thing because somebody in the Wyoming Senate just proposed a bill to phase out electric vehicles. So maybe it's good that they're not in session very often. Next slide. Should I advance these, Amanda, or do you want to do that? Okay, so the good thing is that there's a legislative calendar that provides a lot of structure to how the process from January to September goes. So that helps you because it's very structured and there's deadlines and there's important activities that go along to this. So we just passed a kind of an important deadline, which was February 17th. Bills to be introduced this year had to be introduced by that date. So we just passed that. I don't know, I think I heard there's 2,800 bills that have been introduced, which is a lot of bills. Somebody else might know the actual number. So that's important because we kind of now know more or less what we're going to be working with, what's going to be moving through the legislature this year. Then I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just know that there's this structured calendar helps you kind of plan out your work. And the way bills move through the legislature, through committees, getting votes at different levels, moving from the assembly to the Senate. So bills at one point switch houses if they've managed to get that far and haven't died yet. June 15th, the state budget must be passed, but there's even, and for almost everything here, there's can be some kind of interesting things that happen where there's, you know, changes or something that you haven't seen before happens. So you can see just the timing, and these recesses are actually a good time. It's not quite like Congress where they come back from Washington, D.C. and they're in their district and they do a lot of meetings, but those recesses are times when it is a good time to be planning meetings with your legislators back in their home district, because you can get a lot more people in your district to go to a meeting than you can to go to Sacramento. So just be aware that this legislative calendar helps you plan out your activities. And ultimately, the last day of this legislative session is September 14th, and then the governor has 30 days to either sign or veto bills or take no action. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the timeline. Then how a bill becomes a law. This is kind of the requisite, you know, you have to talk about this, even though again, it is pretty much how things work, but there's a lot of back and forth and there can be changes and some strange things happening. So a bill gets introduced, it gets assigned to a committee by the Rules Committee. You might have heard in Congress where the Republicans took over the Rules Committee in the House and are wreaking havoc on how things are happening with bills in the House. So the Rules Committee looks at a bill and says, what does this bill do to state law? What does it have to do with? Is it about electricity? Is it about water? Is it about food? And then they make decisions what committee those bills are going to go to. And I'm just going to go through this pretty briefly, but because there's another couple slides I'll talk this through about. But there's a set process, and again, just like the calendar, there's deadlines. When you want to take action on a bill, you need to know when is it going to the committee, when do we need to get a letter in on our position, when do we need to be talking to members of that committee, etc. So it is structured, which is nice because you can use that, except when it's not. So bills go through two houses. So if they start in the assembly, which would be an Assembly Bill 1000, let's say, in June, it has to pass in the assembly and move over to the Senate. So the way I understand, Amanda and Ashley, what you've said about your timeline, that you hope to get your policy work kind of up and going in April and May, that will be great because bills will have seen their first house and we'll see if they survive and pass into the second house. And the summer goes by really quickly. So you want to get your bills, you know, your priorities in mind and get people knowledgeable about what to do and then use that over the summer months. So that's just a little overview. Oops, next slide. Oh, and at the bottom of that, I there are a lot of this is online at the state legislature. The state Senate and the state assembly have very good websites, so you can take a look at, more details in these documents. So where do climate bills go? Which committees are they assigned to? So these are I just broke out some of the main ones, but obviously we are proceeding to move away from fossil fuels and towards clean electricity and clean energy. So there's clean energy bills that deal with all kinds of things about how to do that clean energy. I saw somebody in the chat talk about microgrid. So this is a whole question about how are we getting to 100% clean electricity and all the bills that relate to those processes. Transportation is the leading cause of emissions in California. It's about 41%. If you add the refinery emissions in, it's almost up to 50%. So transportation is a huge need, and transportation doesn't stand on its own. Land use is involved with how our transportation systems work and why they're so difficult to change. So these are just some areas that the bills would be written about. For electrification, there's cars, buses, trucks, freight, ships, charging infrastructure. It's not just one thing. So there's lots of different bills that take on different pieces of these issues and really solutions. And then even if we get to clean energy and clean transportation, we cannot keep extracting and using fossil fuels. So those are two anchors to this work around climate change. And California, I think, is now the 6th or 7th largest oil producing state. We're probably the largest consuming state of fossil fuels, just because of our population and our reliance on vehicles. So that's a big area of a lot of fights, because this is not easy. This is not easy work to change from an economy that's based on fossil fuels and that employs a lot of people and that has a lot of profits flowing from that industry, and a lot of vested interests. Don't want this to turn out the way that climate advocates and health folks know that we need to move away from combustion. So that's an area. And then climate resilience and adaptation, as the climate impacts become more pronounced and become, a greater factor in our environment, extreme weather, this is a growing concern. And there's more and more bills every year about climate resilience and adaptation needs, whether it's heat, excessive heat, or sea level rise, or flooding, which we're seeing a lot of this year after a drought. And then there's emerging technologies. So I think I saw a few people like a health engineer, there are a lot of technical issues in this work, but doesn't mean you need to know all of them. You need to find out who knows all of them and learn enough to, bring the health perspective and your health expertise to that argument. And then on the right-hand side is just, these are the names of the committees that tend to hear these policy areas. And you might note that I didn't put in the health committee. Some bills do go to the health committee, and many bills have a health component, but the health committees have not played a major role in climate change. And there's a longer discussion we could have about why that is. Next slide. I'd actually be interested in hearing what Will Barrett from the Lung Association has to say about the health committees. So I thought we would look at a bill from last year that was a top priority for many of our organizations statewide, because it has to do with restricting the damage to health being done by our existing oil and gas production operations, drilling of wells and on their operations. And so a bill has a number. Senate bill is SB 1137. And this was a bill last year to create oil and gas health protection zones, which kind of in our parlance was called the setbacks bill. And this was meant to protect communities near oil and gas operations, which predominantly are communities of color and low income people. And Los Angeles and Kern County are the preponderance of wells, but they are all over the state. So just to structure this a little bit, the bill had an author. Senator Lorena Gonzalez. The bill had a sponsor. Many bills are sponsored by advocacy organizations, which means they come up with the idea, they write the bill or they write the essence of the bill, and they go to a legislator and say, will you carry our bill? So this is actually quite frequent in how bills come out are developed in the legislature. What does this bill do? It would create a 3,200 foot setback from oil and gas wells. What committees will it go to? Well, it has to go through whatever policy committees, this issue would has to do with changing state law. And that's, either natural resources or environmental quality committees. So you'll kind of get to know the committees that a lot of climate bills go to over time. And then one of the things the legislature has to look at is what does this cost? What is doing this cost to the state, to industry, and other stakeholders or the economy? So there's a structured way costs are looked at in the legislature through the Appropriations Committee. Both the Assembly and the Senate have Appropriations Committee. And then there's the political dimension of these bills. Who supports it and who opposes it, which is, as much as understanding this process, the politics are pretty important to also understand as you decide how to approach your work. You want to at least understand it and work with others. So this bill, after many years of different numbers on this bill, trying to get a setback for these communities, I think it was 5 years formally in the legislature, which failed to pass. Last year it passed. The governor actually supported it as part of his climate package and leaned on members of the legislature to help him pass it. And it did pass, and he signed it. 3 weeks later, the oil industry in California filed a ballot measure, went out and collected 625,000 registered voter names on a ballot, and has qualified a referendum on the ballot, which would reverse this law. So not to discourage you, but these processes are not always linear. We are building power to win the changes and the solutions that we need. And there are powerful interests and other forces in the political spectrum who will push back or who will disagree. So you have to just be aware of that. And I'm sure all of you are well aware. So this measure is now going to be on the ballot in November 2024. But in the meantime, because it qualified, the bill signed by the governor cannot go forward protecting these communities. It's put on hold until the vote. So I just wanted to give you that one bill to illustrate some of the structure, the process, and the politics of what goes on. And that's just one bill out of many. But it was a priority for many of us in CHN and Physicians for Social Responsibility and Lung Association. Many, many, many health groups helped pass this bill, and we'll continue to work on it. Next slide. So I've just given you an overview of committees and places where votes happen, but bills move and things happen to them. So there's some really good tracking tools that you can spend this next month or two, kind of just if you have some time, looking up and seeing what you can learn. And one of them is just a basic tool called Ledge Info, which is put together by legislative staff, and it tracks where a bill is in the process. So if you know a bill number or a legislator's name, you can look up bills. You can do word searches. You can look up a bill number that you've either heard about or read about and track it as it moves through the legislature, both in the assembly, moving to the next, votes, what happened with the votes, and moving on to the next step. So I do encourage all of you to kind of at some point take a look at this legislature. This website, because it's an invaluable tool for those of us doing legislative work, even if you're only tangentially involved or you're very involved. This is a tool that you'll want to kind of learn about. Then at the same time, you're not on your own in entering into this. And I know there's some folks on this call that are actually very experienced doing legislative work, and they would probably kind of reiterate this, but you want to work with partners to the extent that you can. You don't have to learn things from scratch. There's a lot of people out there that can help you get good background and insights into a bill. You want to understand the politics of the bill, its history. Does it have a history? Is it building on building blocks of other things, which a lot of climate solutions are building on a lot of work that now needs to go to the next level and the next level and the next level. Who supports and opposes them, and what are the costs of action? So in the legislature, you might hear a lot about, oh, this bill costs too much. But what they don't hear is the cost of inaction. And this is where I think health professionals can have a really important role to play of, you know, the costs to health of inaction, especially as climate change progresses and becomes more and more severe. And the you know, benefits to health of taking the action. So I think that's an area where health folks have a lot to contribute. You want to follow the bill and in the process, like I said, and know when the actions are needed. You can miss a deadline and then go, oh no, we missed the deadline, which isn't the end of the world. But if you want to, you know, weigh in and have your voice count and be present and visible, you know, you do need to follow that process. Somebody in your organization does. Bills usually get weaker as they move through the process. They don't usually get stronger. There could be some exceptions to this. So you want to watch for amendments. Bills come up and powerful interests or advocacy groups, other legislators can say, oh, I like your bill, but I don't like this part of it. Will you change it? And groups submit amendments or fight over amendments as bills go through the process. So you do want to, and amendments can turn a bill completely upside down. Many groups or coalitions have lobbyists or connections to legislators. Use them. Again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. You have a lot of allies who are going to be extremely happy to see Climate Health Now and other health groups get more involved in the process and speak from your unique view of the health of your patients, your communities, the public, and support taking stronger actions. And that leads to you developing a strategy. What are the health angles and arguments for or against a bill? Which, you know, that's very important. And I don't think legislators hear enough about this, or I think they could hear more. Public messaging, you know, if you know a lot about a bill, but you're not telling other people about it, it's probably not going to be as strong an effort as it could be. So, you know, physicians or nurses or public health leaders writing op-eds in the Sacramento Bee, which is the newspaper that all of these folks read in Sacramento, you know, that can have an impact, and people do a lot of that kind of work to get the word out. And so does the industry, and the other sides of these issues uses the same technique. So you're kind of fighting over the airspace, and you're both educating people and warning them and saying, we're here, we take this seriously, and this is why, from the health community. So those are just some things to think about as you're following a bill through the process. So what could you be doing about it, and marshaling your resources? And then not all legislators come from, you know, Berkeley or Santa Monica, and they have very different districts. I've met with Amanda's parents up in Napa, who, you know, it's a rural area. I live in a rural area in Monterey County. It's very different than living in the Bay Area. So you have to know what matters to your legislators, who they listen to, who they get money from, et cetera. Next slide. I'm kind of getting to the end here because we want to have some time for questions and answers. Just a note on the state budget. Money makes the world go round and creates authority to take action and the ability to implement things that need to change or be done. So there's a whole slightly different process. It's parallel to the bills going through is the state budget going through. So the governor in January proposed a state budget for 2023, 2024. Again, it's a 2-year budget. And California has moved from a $100 billion surplus the last 2 years to a $25 billion deficit, in large part because of capital gains and the stock market and the recession and inflation. So there's a pendulum here that swings that we have to understand and see where we can advocate for and speak loudly for the need for climate crisis is not going away. It's getting worse. And it requires the state to really commit to ongoing progressive and equitable funding from here on out. But there's a lot of other needs in the budget too. So that's why working together with coalitions and other organizations is really important to be effective on the budget. And I'm not going to go into any more detail about that now. Next slide. Then there's working with your legislators. And this is almost the last slide. This is a little bit of an old slide because there's some people that aren't in the legislature anymore, and there's some Congress people here. But these are your people. These people vote in Sacramento. You don't vote on the House, the Senate, or the Assembly floor. They do. So you really need to be talking to them and letting them know your concerns, your ideas, your support for solutions, your sense of urgency, and help them learn things about the health and climate connection that these people are dealing with bills, thousands of bills of topics from A to Z, and climate is one, and it's an important one for many, many people, but it's not at the top of the list for everybody. And again, they need to get input from their constituents and experts in the field of climate and health. So just many meetings are still going on in online on Zoom, but people are also starting to do in-person meetings. So I just wanted to share that. This is constituents, regular people, people in communities, some of whom also are professional or expert in some field, but it's really democracy in action, and making sure if you have an opinion or you want to educate them or give them feedback, positive or negative, this is the process. And this is your opportunity to do that. Next. And since I just recently moved to Monterey, I like whenever I go through the Salinas Valley, I always take these two pictures, the wind turbines or the oil field that's over 100 years old at San Ardo. So I'm going to end with that visual. And thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Awesome. We don't have quite as much time for questions and discussion, though I think what that says is, Kathy, we will be inviting you back if you will attend. I think we probably have time maybe for one or two questions. We got some in the chat. Does anyone want to come off mute and ask a question?
I see Michael.
Sure. Thanks for a fantastic presentation. I'm the executive director of an organization called the California Alliance of Academics and Communities for Public Health Equity, and representing all of the public health schools and programs that have degree programs here in the state of California, and working with many other coalitions. Environmental health is one of our priorities. I wondered what your thoughts are on these capital days or these advocacy days that sort of folks go and they spend time, they go there and they sort of try to visit with the different representatives. How valuable is that as a one step? And there's many of these days, as you well know. So, how do you choose when you've got a limited amount of time?
That's a great question. There's no single issue that will, promote a bill's passage or defeat. There's a lot of different steps that are taken. And, showing up and being visible and getting media coverage for being there and being insistent and giving your voices from their district, especially, has a role to play. I think they're all important. All the things I mentioned, including lobby days, can play a role. There's no single issue. We need to do all of them.
So get to work. Thank you, Kathy. I see Robin's hand up.
Kathy, absolutely fantastic overview. I took lots of notes. I want to just ask, you mentioned the area of adaptation and resilience as one of the categories, and I'm wondering if you're aware of any particular legislative efforts in the realm of mental health resilience and response.
I'm not, but there could be something bubbling up this year. Yeah, I'm not, Robin, aware of exactly what's been proposed, but that's the kind of idea that would largely come from the mental health community, to let legislators know, hey, this is a growing problem. It's not being addressed. We're seeing it in our, clients and our patients, especially young people or whomever. And that's a message that needs to get across to legislators, but I don't know, I haven't looked at all the bills yet.
Oh, what's wrong with you? Actually, there is a bill at the national level in Congress on mental health resilience that would be block grants through the CDC to develop community resilience plans. It's Tonka's the leader out of New York who's promoting that, but I wondered about California.
Yeah, sorry, I went over a little bit and there's not enough time for questions, but I'm happy to, talk with people or try to be helpful as we go forward together.
Kathy, I just wanted to uplift one other question because I think it'll be relatively short that came up earlier in the chat. So you said you thought there were about 2,800 bills introduced at the beginning of this 2-year legislative cycle. Someone was asking, do you have what sort of number or percentage of bills usually progress through from one house to the next? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, one thing I didn't say is bills in the first session cannot move forward and be picked up in the second year of the session. So that's one thing that's a little bit different this year, is if a bill doesn't pass this year, it can continue next year and be brought up as a 2-year bill. I don't know. Will Barrett might know the answer to that. A lot of bills die, but a good portion of them do move forward through part of the process, and they can die in many different ways. In the committee, a legislator can say, oh, I don't have support for that bill, or the opposition is too strong this year. The California Nurses Association and advocates have introduced a single payer bill, I think, for 10 years, and we'll keep doing it because it's an important issue to put in front of policymakers and the public.
Okay, I don't know if Will is still on, but I think in the interest of time, we will wrap things up. And I think, Kathy, I'm foreseeing potentially a text Q&A that I can share with these other questions, and maybe we can get some written answers that we can share out with everyone as well. But thank you all for being here. One message that I really hope comes across is we are not expert on this, and we don't have to be expert on this, right? We are learning together, and our climate superpower, if you will, is our health voices. I literally think of that as like a cape. Like when I put that cape on, I can do things that I wouldn't think that I could usually do. And so this is what it's about. This is the system, the game, and we are gonna enter it together and meet everyone where they are and bring everyone up together. So I hope we all leave with that sentiment, because we feel it really strongly. Awesome. So thank you again. We're gonna close out. Shwin, do you want to just share these out and then we'll end?
Yeah, for sure. We have a couple of reminders, save the dates, and some community shout outs. So Lori, she's going to be giving a talk tomorrow night. And so, we're always very excited when CHN members are out there spreading the word about the connection between climate change and health. Brenda and I actually are speaking about climate and health at the USC Women's Conference this Friday, and it's apparently sold out. So that's pretty crazy. And then Pam, she was awarded funding for quantifying the environmental impact of contact precautions for MRSA and VRE in LA County. So that is awesome. Again, another plug that you are going to get a email tomorrow morning at 7:30 to update your profile in Powerbase. Please, please, please can update it. It's very quick. We actually are streamlining our application so that we just get the information we really need. And then it's also Amanda and I believe some others are going to the Med Society Consortium annual meeting in Washington, D.C. in March 19th. And so this is more on the national level, but we are encouraging everyone who can to join us. And so if you'd like more information, you can reach out to Amanda and I, or you can just Google Med Society Consortium annual meeting and you'll get to it. So yeah, all right. Thank you, everyone. And Amanda,
everyone for being here, and be on the lookout for these emails tomorrow morning. Awesome. And Kathy, thank you again so much.
Thank you, Kathy. Woohoo!
Thank you, guys.
Let's go get them.
Yeah,
Bye, everyone. Take care.